Good afternoon, and welcome to our Alumni Insights webinar featuring Dr. Debra Yeskey, graduate of the Duquesne University School of Pharmacy, here to cover the global partnerships for equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. I'm Jamie Steele, Director of Alumni Volunteer Networks, and I'm excited to have you join us today. Before we jump into the introduction of our moderator and presenter, I'd like to take a moment to thank my colleague and alumna, Audrey Tierney, Director of Alumni Programs, for arranging this webinar. Audrey will be managing the technical aspects of the program. Throughout the presentation, your mics will be muted, but you are welcome to submit questions or comments through the chat feature found on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Pre-submitted questions and those received through the chat will be addressed, time permitting, following the presentation. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator. Dr. Pam Koerner, a double duker from the School of Pharmacy, is currently the Assistant Dean in the School of Pharmacy. Dr. Koerner is also the Director of the Pharmacy Alumni Association and the Director of the Giant Eagle Center for Pharmacy Practice. Dr. Koerner's primary research interest revolves around the high-cost, high-risk disease states at Walgreens Specialty. These to date have included multiple sclerosis, hepatitis C, and oral oncology. We're happy that you're able to moderate today, Pam. Thank you for joining us. I'll turn the program over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. I'm excited to be joining you as the moderator today for this very timely program that has really impacted our lives over the past year. Dr. Debra Yeskey is the head of regulatory policy and intelligence for CEPI, a partnership of public, private, philanthropic, and civil organizations that will finance and coordinate the development of vaccines against high priority public health threats and vaccine platform technologies to respond rapidly to emerging infectious disease with pandemic and epidemic potential. Prior to joining CEPI, Debra served as the Director of Regulatory and Quality Affairs Division within the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. She serves as the Director of Regulatory and Quality Affairs Division for over 10 years. In addition to the above, Debra also served as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Public Health Service and created the Office of Regulatory Affairs at the National Center for Infectious Disease within the CDC. She was responsible for regulatory preparedness of all the medical countermeasures within the Strategic National Stockpile. She provided expert advice, guidance, and regulatory policy regarding the regulatory readiness of the Strategic National Stockpile and the status of all investigational new drug applications and pre-emergency use authorization requests held by the CDC. As a U.S. Public Health Service officer, she also worked with the FDA and the NIH. She is trained as an EMT and was a member of the Public Health Service Disaster Medical Assistance Team. She has responded to numerous natural disasters, has pre-deployed for planned mass public events, and was part of the CDC's response to the events of 9/11 and the anthrax attacks in 2001. Deb received a Bachelor of Pharmacy degree from the Duquesne University School of Pharmacy and her PharmD from Creighton University. For these reasons and more, I'm happy to introduce Dr. Deb Yeskey to give you information today on the global COVID-19 vaccine status and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation. Deb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pam. Hello, and thank you to Audrey and Jamie and Pam again for having me today. And I just wanted to take the time right now to introduce you to CEPI, what we are doing in the response to COVID, and just to give a current snapshot of what is happening, although it's in the news every day, so we are well aware of it. My talk probably will not go into public health per se. This is we're more of a vaccine development entity, so my talk is basically going to talk about vaccine development. So CEPI was created. So we are a coalition for epidemic preparedness innovations, like Pam said. We were created in 2007 in the response of the 2014 West African Ebola epidemic. as a result of a consensus that a coordinated international and intergovernmental plan was needed to develop and deploy new vaccines to prevent future epidemics. We were launched in 2017 in Davos by the governments of Norway, India, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, and the World Economic Forum. So we are this innovative partnership that spans public, private, philanthropic, and civil society organizations. And our goal is to create a world in which epidemics are no longer a threat to humanity. The photo there is from a retreat in 2018. I joined CEPI from being with the US government in December of 2018. And this was a retreat that we had in Norway, where we were just probably about 40 staff members in the CEPI Secretariat. Now I can say that our numbers have grown substantially because of COVID. We probably have over 150 folks within CEPI, some of which we've never met face-to-face. We do have 3 offices. The headquarters is in Oslo, Norway. We have a UK office in London, where most of the R&D work within CEPI takes place, and which is the organization, part of the organization that I am in is Vaccine R&D. And we do have a DC office as well. Just recently, last year, we have an office in Shanghai, China, to help us with initiatives that we have ongoing with China as well. So this is our mission and vision, and what I just wanted to talk about, you know, our vision is really important to us in the fact that to make the vaccines that we have in development accessible to all people. And specifically, I'll talk about those vaccines in a minute, what our core portfolio looks like. But we, in all of our agreements that we have with our developers, we write into those agreements equitable access clauses, that they have to abide by those clauses to make these vaccines available, especially to affected country individuals, which are typically in the low middle income countries, the LMICs. This is just to illustrate what our global partnership looks like. We are governed by a board, and we have investors, we have a scientific advisory committee, and then we have partners and a joint coordination group. Coming from the government and knowing how bureaucratic the government, the US government can be, I was surprised to see how much, I guess, bureaucracy was in this small nonprofit organization from the beginning. But it's really good to have these partners and helping us navigate this global initiative. This is just another picture about where we sit and how we have this unique relationship, because as a part of our name, we are a coalition. So we can easily collaborate with global partners, and you know, with the public and private partnerships, it's our you know, our mission to link these entities together. As I said before, we do have a scientific advisory committee that helps us, you know, with guidance, giving us guidance for information. We present to them on our plans for, you know, different initiatives and getting their feedback. And the scientific, and we just renewed our scientific advisory board or committee, and where we try to get the best of different expertise across this ecosystem, vaccine ecosystem. These are our strategic objectives, where preparedness, response, and sustainability are very important to us to access, to advance the access of safe and effective vaccines, accelerating the research, development and the use of the vaccines during outbreaks. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. And then creating sustainable markets so that, again, for equitable access to LMICs and affected country individuals that during an outbreak or an epidemic would need to use these vaccines. This is our portfolio, and so we talk about, and much like the world, we talk about pre and post COVID. So our pre-COVID portfolio is all of those things that are not labeled the COVID-19 vaccine portfolio. And we based our portfolio on MERS, Lassa, Nipah, chikungunya, Rift Valley fever, and disease X prior to COVID. So at the start of 2017, when we were launched, and we put out calls for proposal for these various priority agents, and we decided on these agents based on the WHO R&D blueprint priority list. Well, chikungunya is on the watch list. It's not one of the priorities, but so these were the agents that they chose as priorities that had the potential, that were neglected diseases, that did not have any vaccines available, and had the potential to cause outbreaks and or pandemics. And before I go on, we just got some good information. One of our chikungunya developers just got good news that they had very good positive results in their phase 3 trial. So this is very good news for us. And going on to this slide, this just gives you a snapshot of where our portfolio is in the development, the regulatory development of these vaccines. A lot are still in the preclinical phase, phase 1 and 2. Again, Valneva was the one there in phase 3 that just got the positive results. And of course, we do have a number of vaccines that are in phase 2b/3 for COVID. So I just thought that this was a very interesting slide, and because we have been humankind has been battling, threats from infectious diseases for forever. But really, the advances that we've made in this past year really has the potential to drastically reduce the threat posed by all infectious epidemic and pandemic diseases. If you look at the top and looking at, the red dot to the blue dot, when the pathogen was first linked to the disease to when there was a licensed vaccine. Now, granted, in the US, COVID vaccines are not licensed. They're authorized for use under an emergency use authorization mechanism. So, but it's very short for COVID. And what we're learning, and what we have are sort of standing on the shoulders of giants as far as all the research that has been previously done with mRNA, I can never say that fast, mRNA vaccines helped us get to what we are seeing now with COVID, with the COVID vaccines that are available. So at the beginning, when we first started to embark on finding a vaccine or making a vaccine, 18 months was being bantered about, and that was 18 months was very ambitious in and of itself. However, from the first approval of the vaccine to the scale of large-scale trials was issued in December was just a mere 326 days after the virus was sequenced. That is just really unheard of. And again, this is based on, and even though that was fast, it was very fast, that it really was the foundation of all of the years of experience and the years of research for the mRNA platform technology. So it really is, and now that we have that, we can expand upon those learnings and those technologies to help us with planning for further outbreaks and pandemics. So as outlined in the G7 document that was, I think, a couple months ago, it is CEPI's aspiration to reduce this 300 days to 100 days for future outbreaks. And as you can see in the slide, if you, with this this line there at 100 days, you can see how having a vaccine much earlier than 300 days could really help the trajectory of lives lost. So switching gears a little bit now, and talking about the pandemic, this is in the news every day, we live it, and it's really kind of surreal in being in preparedness planning for a number of years, is that we're in this pandemic. Sometimes it's just, it really till this day it kind of takes my breath away that that it is this widespread and it has changed everybody's life, and the lives lost, the amount of money for the global economy, and just it really has highlighted disparities, and there are going to be so many lessons learned when the dust settles, and just I don't even really know when that dust will settle, but we will be learning from this for a long time. So just to describe how we started with the COVID-19 response. We started early because in our core portfolio, we have the MERS and Disease X projects. And MERS is a coronavirus vaccine, and Disease X, we had three partnerships, agreements with 3 different entities at the time of, I don't know, I guess, well, Disease X, okay. So Disease X was, I have to go back and see when I started. Disease X portfolio started before I started. So the fact of the matter is that we started with labs and academic institutions in starting to think about if something were to happen that we did not know, what if it was an emerging infectious disease that we didn't know yet, what would we do? And so these groups were very early on. They were in preclinical work, and what happened was we had just come back from Christmas holidays, and it was January 2nd. We just come back, and we have an EPI team within CEPI, and they would alert us to certain things going on, and they alerted us that there was something going on in China, and so we started following it and taking a look at it, and then at some point, it was growing bigger. And early on, we decided that we were going to switch our Disease X projects into a live fire exercise. And so we turned those 3 programs on, and we were waiting, you know, to get the sequencing and things of that nature. So by the time it was at the January 20th, we had 4 contracts for coronavirus vaccines. So it just, you know, it just goes to show that, you know, being very mindful and intentional about what we've set out to do, because of, you know, because of what we were put in place to do, we were ready to act at that given moment. So, and it was sort of ironic too, that at the time, our CEO, Richard Hatchett, was in Davos for the World Economic Forum. So it was 3 years after our launch, and where he was able to make the announcement that we had just signed our third vaccine candidate for coronavirus vaccine at that forum, which only 3 years later or earlier we were launched. So this is our portfolio. These are there are 10 right here of our active portfolio. And just to break down the technologies, we talked about the mRNA. We have a DNA vaccine, viral vector vaccines, and protein-based vaccines that we are funding. They are in different phases. They are looking at and going through different regulatory authority review, some in the US, some in the UK, some in both, and then some China and India and South Korea, and talk about the platforms there. So, and then not only, and I'm going to talk a little bit about COVAX here in a little bit, but again, this is just to summarize the things that we are doing in addition to our responsibilities within COVAX, is that, you know, we do have one of the world's largest vaccine portfolio. We are trying to harmonize the assessment of vaccines. We are tracking the variants, and then we are looking at advancing broadly protective coronavirus vaccines. So this is, we have launched a global network of labs, a laboratory network that tests for this, that uses the same assay. And what we're trying to do is standardize using the WHO international standard to make sure that the data can be interpretable and comparable. And this will help for the identification of reliable correlates of protection. Will also support creation of uniform data packages to aid in the ease of speed of future regulatory decisions. So this is very important, and we're trying to get you know, all of our developers, as well as the other COVID vaccine developers, to use our laboratory network. We're also tracking the variants, as this is something that is definitely in the news as of late. We recently announced funding of like $140 million to open up scientific groups worldwide to rapidly perform these trials to gain initial clinical research and optimize and extend the use of existing vaccines. And that's through our clinical group. It's looking at trials. The trials are looking at the impact of variants on vaccine efficacy, transmission studies, mix and match studies of different vaccines, and the use of combinations to improve the quality and strength of the immune response. And I just before signing on to give this presentation, I was at a workshop talking about booster doses, and that had a number of experts there, including regulators, to talk about, and to discuss thoughts about booster doses. So it, needless to say, it's very complex, and there's many different combinations and permutations that make it very, very complex, and whether their regulators would be leaning towards licensure of a booster dose, or would it be something more of a policy, a public health policy, way to go. I think that hearing the FDA talk, they very much are in favor of looking at risk benefit of a booster dose, and because right now the vaccines that we have are efficacious against the variants that are out there in preventing serious disease and hospitalization. So far right now, and I think that's why a couple weeks ago, or a week ago or so, CDC and FDA came out with a statement about right now the US doesn't need to have any kind of booster doses, and WHO yesterday made a statement about a moratorium on any booster doses at this time. Did I go? Okay, so I'm going to transition now to talk about access to COVID vaccine tools Accelerator, Act A, and COVAX. This is something that CEPI has been very involved with since April of last year, having to stand up this entity of activity. And so what is the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator? It is this global collaboration to accelerate the development and the production of vaccines, tests, and treatments. So it's not only vaccines. CEPI is only in the vaccine pillar of the ACT Accelerator, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it was launched in 2020 by the Director General of the WHO and the President of France and the European Commission, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this was done in a public, two-day public meeting and presentation from all different kinds of ministries of health and the like. And it really spans the ecosystem, and I can say that the U.S. wasn't really involved in this early on. They are now, but this was really just a global, international, global effort to accelerate these tests, treatments, and vaccines, and especially to make them accessible to those in LMIC countries, or LMIC countries, yeah. So this specifically, I'm just going to drill down quickly into, because I'm not really involved in the other things, but COVAX is the vaccine pillar. And so our mandate is to, develop safe and efficacious new vaccines, and then to the initial aim was to have 2 billion doses by the end of 2021. If you read any of the press recently talking about the failing of COVID or failing of COVAX, I'll talk about that in a little bit. So this is just, again, governance, which is very important. The governance from Act A, specifically for COVAX, is that we have, COVAX coordination meetings. We have our board chair, Jade Holton, as well as the Gavi board chair, Dr. Ngozi. And then we have work stream leads. That it was very important for us to have a broad range of expertise in this effort. And so we have industry represented from DCVMN and IFPMA, as well as WHO and other philanthropic organizations such as Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust, PATH, Gavi, UNICEF. So specifically, CEPI is in the development and the manufacturing piece there on the left. And so we co-lead this with industry. We answer to an RD&M, Research and Development and Manufacturing Investment Committee. So the monies that we that are given to us by ministries of health and other funders are scrutinized by this committee. We have a technical research group, again, scrutinizing the plans and oversight of the development of these vaccines and of these specific vaccines and for the portfolio. So we have the vaccine teams, which are the project teams, and so it's specific by vaccine, and each vaccine development team has a list of, or has a group of people that follow it, from clinical, CMC, chemistry and manufacturing controls, regulatory, and sometimes EPI, and preclinical. And this is the group that shepherds the development of the vaccine through the regulatory pathway. And then we have what's called SWAT teams. SWAT doesn't stand for anything, and there were a lot of people that on the European side that hated that word and tried to get it changed, and it never changed. So anyway, so it kept as a SWAT team. We'll talk a bit about that in a couple minutes. So again, this is just a picture of how, where we sit: diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. CEPI, is responsible for development and manufacturing. Gavi is the one that has the COVAX facility, and this is where countries pay into having vaccine, and then vaccine they get the vaccine from the COVAX facility to go to the LMICs and different places. High-income countries help pay for the LMICs, the low middle income countries, to get vaccine. And then we have the policy and allocation piece of the vaccine pillar through WHO. And then we have these partners down at the bottom: Wellcome Trust and DCVMN, our industry partners. So the founding principles of COVAX was because of the need to pull something together to respond to this pandemic in the global ecosystem, knowing that WHO, Gavi, UNICEF, and others, and really we were trying to figure out our role, and because this was the first big event at the beginning. It wasn't that big, but at the beginning, where CEPI was going to land. We know where we wanted to be, but we needed to also, being the new kid on the block, play well in the sandbox with others. So it was important to have a unified voice across these three entities. And then, I'm not a business person at all, but having this end-to-end funding tool for the purchase of vaccine, and then the delivery of vaccines for equitable access, transparency. And it was very important, this multilateral issues and initiatives and information sharing was very important to understand all of the moving parts. And there are many moving parts, and we're still learning, and we're, you know, there's a lot to learn. And are we getting it right, 100% right all the time? No, but you know, we're trying our best, and we have very, very smart people on a whole host of different levels looking at this and helping us to do this. And then this was also, again, more risk resistant, is where we could, because of the funding that we were receiving, we could secure manufacturing sites for fill finish, for instance, and you know, put that money down to reserve that, so that wouldn't be a bottleneck in the end. So again, a lot of these things, you know, haven't always run smoothly, but it was, you know, and I hate the phrase because it's been used so much, is that, you know, we're building the plane while we're flying it, but it was actually the God's honest truth. You know, we stood it up in April and started to use it instantaneously as we were trying to figure out these things going on. So I did, earlier this week, my husband sent me this news clip about how vast global vaccination programs, what went wrong. And again, you know, we're learning, and we're not getting it right 100% of the time, but I can say that, you know, in our latest estimates, we have 2.3 billion doses of COVID vaccine to be rolled out worldwide. The facility, you know, is working. We have, you know, we have the right of first refusal to access potentially more than 1 billion doses of CEPI supported COVID-19 vaccine candidates. And that is ongoing through our portfolio. And these agreements mean that, you know, COVAX, 190 participating countries or eligible economies have signed up, representing over 90% of the world's population, and that will have access to these vaccines. We did have some hiccups with planning in March and April, but with those first deliveries being a little bit slow, we are, you know, we are delivering, or the COVAX facility is delivering these needed vaccines to the LMICs. Let's see. So just a little bit of a drill down into the COVAX, not to spend too much time, but we do have these under the circle up top, is that we have these SWAT teams. I talked about them a little bit earlier. We have enabling science, manufacturing, as well as clinical development and operations. So the workshop that I just came from is was a workshop led by the clinical development and operations SWAT team, which they have a number of different workshops that anybody can attend. And I'll give you a website at the end of my talk that if you ever wanted to sign up to, you know, to attend those. It's co-led, all of those SWAT teams are co-led by one of our partners plus a CEPI co-lead. And then the regulatory advisory group, something near and dear to my heart, we stood up as well at the time of the SWAT teams, and we thought it was very important. The thought process was that regulatory was going to be another SWAT team, but it was very important for us that to be useful in this context is to not have industry representatives be a part of this group. We wanted regulators from around the globe to be a part of the regulatory as members, and very limited observers to this group, so that that regulators could have free and open conversations and discussions about the various challenges and issues, items, questions that are coming up from the vaccine teams. And that's the goal of the regulatory advisory group, is that we get questions from the vaccine teams and or the SWAT teams that the developers are having issues with. They come to the advisory group in a product agnostic way that we can talk about and discuss certain things. We have talked about post-approval commitments. We've talked about labeling and QR codes. We've talked about correlates of protection, immunobridging, and things of that nature. And so it's very important. And sometimes we don't have hard and fast answers per se coming back to the developers, and they might not like that so much. But it's helping the regulators get their heads around these issues. They take those issues back to their agencies and discuss them within their agencies. And then when these questions come up, when they get questions from a specific developer about immunobridging or correlates of protection, they can rely on what they've talked about with their colleagues during this regulatory advisory group meetings. And this is just a little bit more about that. Just shows you in a picture. We do have monthly meetings. They happen monthly. Sometimes we don't have them. The last couple meetings have been closed door, where we don't take minutes and we don't record it, so that the regulators can feel free to talk about certain things. And it helps them prepare also, not only for when they go back to their individual regulatory authorities, but it also helps them when they go to places in discussions with the International Medicines Regulatory Group, ICMRA. It furthers along those conversations. So it's sort of a soft, I don't know, a soft win or whatever, not win, but anyway. So these are the countries that are in the regulatory advisory group. We've just added, we started with 9, I believe, and FDA was always involved, EMA, Singapore, Brazil. We have EDQM, even though they're not a regulatory body, but they have regulatory functions within Europe for batch release. Health Canada, Australia, and we just recently added MHRA post-Brexit. We also now have Japan, South Korea, and India, DCGI, as well as AVRF. And FDA Ghana. So these are the groups and regulatory authorities that are represented in the regulatory advisory group. We also have observers from Gavi, UNICEF, and PAHO. So now to switch gears, because I'm talking a lot and it's almost time, that just a current snapshot of what's going on. Again, this was as of August 1st, that you see the number of confirmed cases, 4.2 million deaths. There is 3.3 billion doses administered. COVAX has shipped over 177 million vaccines to 138 participants as of August 3rd. And this was the latest shipment to Laos, the Republic of Laos. This is brand new off the press that I borrowed from a colleague of mine from the workshop. And again, talking about vaccine access to LMICs, which are still lagging, and the uncertainties remain. And so that, and in talking with a colleague from FDA Ghana the other day, is that they approved vaccines, and that this is a big capacity building issue for CEPI regulatory is reaching out to national regulatory authorities to understand what their capacities are for approval of vaccines, either, of course, for this pandemic, but for outbreaks and epidemics, is that, that it was a big lift for them to approve vaccines, but then yet they don't have any vaccines to give yet. And so, it really is accessibility and the thought process, for the next pandemic is, having regional hubs of manufacturing in countries such as Africa and the like that has a hard time to get vaccines into their country. And what we've experienced too from India, that we have a contract with India, but it's, since they got so hard hit that they weren't allowing any exportation of vaccine from their country because of their current, their situation within India. So, oh, what happened there? So again, what do we know? We know that, the vaccines that are authorized here in the United States, and they actually have a conditional marketing authorization that's an actual licensure. They're actually licensed in Europe and other places, that they've demonstrated efficacy through randomized placebo-controlled trials. And we know that that we have 4 different vaccines from various different technologies, and the endpoints that we have the primary endpoint was establish the efficacy. And so now, and then continue, we do know that cellular response plays a role, but we don't know how that plays in the context of having it be part of any kind of licensure or a correlate of protection. So the crossroads that we're here is that, to meet the global demand, we do need more vaccine. We need additional vaccine. That's why we continue with our portfolio of vaccines and looking at different, even additional vaccines, or second generation, or whatever you want, wave 2, wave 3 vaccines will be still very important to get them approved or authorized for use, because of the need to have this need for vaccines to cover LMICs. We talked about variants. The workshop that I was just at talked a lot about booster doses and how difficult it is right now, what we know, what we don't know. We're talking about, global supply chain and manufacturing task force, again, having manufacturing hubs, learning more about what is needed for tech transfer. It's not easy. If you know anything about vaccine manufacturing, it's like the most fickle manufacturing. Nothing seems to ever go right in vaccine manufacturing, in my opinion. Again, conducting placebo-controlled trials is becoming very increasingly challenging, because of there's no one really left that's naive to either getting the vaccine or being seronegative. Even in the LMIC countries, they're seeing that the seropositivity is greater than they initially thought that it would be, just because of being infected previously. And then it's very important, again, what I talked about in endorsing the use of international standards, so that we can compare data across platforms. So I'm just going to wrap up, and I just talked almost 50 minutes here about the things that CEPI and other global entities are doing in this in this ecosystem of global vaccine development. But I have to say that I wanted to give a thanks to healthcare providers and especially pharmacists giving vaccines and stepping up in those early days when it was kind of frightening to be in your store. Every single day, not maybe every single day, but we're learning so much about this virus, and we still don't know a lot about it. And it seems to be shifting and changing, and the resilience of healthcare providers, especially pharmacists, in being in this role is very heartening. And I'm proud to be a pharmacist, even though I'm not a practicing pharmacist. Is that I just have to say, my hat's off to you all, and thank you very much. So with that, I will end and take any questions, but here is also a list of where you can find some additional information. And with that, thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Deb. And it really was fascinating to learn about all the international collaborations that are in existence to tackle COVID, as well as other diseases that I don't think we hear a lot about. I do have a question from a participant that wanted to share with you. And it says that I don't see pandemic influenza on CEPI's list of priorities. Pandemic flu preparation has a lot of momentum outside of CEPI. Is CEPI sidestepping influenza to allow it to focus on other pathogens?
Well, thank you for the question. We do think that influenza is very important, and so many other entities are focusing on influenza, not to, mention the US government, NIH, BARDA, and the like. So again, our early cue was from the WHO R&D blueprint priority list. And so that's what we came off of. But I can tell you that our Disease X portfolio, some of their initial studies that they were looking at included influenza studies as like a warm base, proof of concept studies.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question here regarding supply. And just as you talked about in your presentation about not having necessarily, do we have enough vaccine for other countries? And there was a question here about, should we focus on more initial vaccines abroad versus focusing on, booster efforts within the United States?
Yeah, I don't know. Quite simply, I think that again, not being from the government and not having that perspective, I think what you're hearing from the subject matter experts and WHO and FDA and CDC is right now, booster doses are really just something that we're not looking into. We're talking about it because I can tell you that developers have done and are doing studies on boosters. Whether they're going to seek a labeling claim for a booster dose remains to be seen, but those studies are being done. In fact, it just, again, this workshop that I keep talking about, Moderna was talking about the booster studies that they have done. So it's being discussed policy-wise, as far as what we do in the US and how we share doses or what we do with boosters. I really can't answer.
And one final question, and it's a general question looking at the pediatric population and how you think maybe that fits into some of the discussion points that you had today.
Yeah, thank you. So as we know, FDA included in their authorization sometime early in the summer, kids 12 to 17 or 12 to 16, however, but the young ones, and I know that this was something that was discussed at our regulatory advisory group, and it was brought up actually by Marian Gruber, the director of vaccines within CBER, it was very important for her and the discussion that the group had about kids from 5 to 11, and that, you know, that placebo-controlled trials with that younger generation or with that younger age group was very important, and not that they needed to generate that efficacy for that age group rather than rely on extrapolation. So I believe that I read somewhere the other day that data from those studies in kids will be coming in early fall.
Okay.
So it is being looked at.
Thank you again, and I'll transition back to Jamie.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. Thank you for your great presentation and for answering the questions from the group. I know all of our participants found your work informative and really insightful. Pam, thank you for your expert moderating skills and for your assistance with this program today. And of course, thank you to all of our alumni and friends for attending today's Alumni Insights. In a follow-up email, all participants will receive a copy of the recording of this program for your reference and sharing. In addition, there will be a link to provide feedback on the program, and we hope that you'll take a minute to provide your commentary on today's event. If you or another alumnus you know would be interested in presenting an Alumni Insights program, a link to the presenter application will be in your follow-up email. Thank you again, and everyone have a great day, stay safe, and as always, go Dukes.